First of all, thank you all for coming. My name is Rainbolt. I am the secretary of the Hist, and I'd like to thank Dermot and Ella for their tremendous amount of work in organizing this kind of event, and of course, Cara Hunter and Dr. Gillespie for their support as well. When we students invest our time and our energy into these kind of debate societies, it is for events like this. This emerging tradition, this yearly collaborative debate between the Hist and Literific to celebrate cross-island solidarity, is an excellent opportunity for the kinds of conversations that we should be having, and I can only hope we can bring it up to Dublin next year. The opportunity to engage directly in discourse, to speak with the nation's leaders and with each other, and to learn about political systems, not from the comfort of a classroom, but through this kind of direct experience, is an opportunity that nowhere else offers. I want to believe that a better future can be made when we talk to each other about issues that matter, and I want to thank everyone involved for making this kind of thing possible. So, thank you, and enjoy the debate.
Thank you very much, Adam. Again, from all of us at the Literific, huge thank you to Tom, and especially also to Adam and Ella for all of the work in making sure this happened. Cara's not here, but a huge thank you to Cara Hunter for sponsoring the room for us today. So I'm just going to go through our speakers. First of all, we have Dr. Paul Gillespie as our guest chair. Jack, you should be over here. Did you bring your gown?
My gown is in someone's bag. I don't know that as well.
That's useful. Okay, so speaking for the proposition, up first we have Noah Ralphs. In second we have Molly Mullan. I'm afraid this is quite illegible. Haslam. Then we have James Tourish, and we have Ritvik Kumar. On the opposition we have Beth Lynam, we have Ella O'Neill, we have Jonathan Massey, and we have Eoin Connolly. Thank you all for coming, and thank these wonderful ladies for agreeing to speak. And I'll pass over to Dr. Gillespie to call the first speaker.
Well, thank you, and you're all very welcome. And we look very much forward to this very topical and emergent, the emergent issues in this debate and how you're going to handle them. So the first speaker for the proposition is Noah Ralphs.
I'm sorry for the incredible sheets of paper that I have. I would like to start the speech by saying that a lot of this information will come from the Joint Committee on the Implementation of the Good Friday Agreement that was written in July 2024 by the Irish Government. Has my time started? Yes, it has. So, this is a very topical debate. The Irish should prepare for reunification. The ultimate goal that was given in the Good Friday Agreement, Section 3, I believe, for full Irish unity. I think now is the perfect time to prepare for reunification, because there are factors in the Good Friday Agreement that say that we can have a referendum, and this has increased support. An Irish Times column by Pat Lee says that support for Irish unity has grown significantly in the past 3 years in Northern Ireland, although a clear majority does remain in favour of staying part of the United Kingdom. In Northern Ireland, 27% of the people living here wanted Irish unity, and in 2024 that increased to 34%, with Protestants increased to 7%. In 2022 it was such a small percentage it didn't actually fit on the screen that the graph was showing. There's also, in the new age of populism, a lot of other factors that might lead to reunification. I obviously, same by accent, grew up in England, and it's not too hard to believe that a populist, opportunistic politician might play into English nationalities and break up the union, what might lead to reunification. So now we have to discuss why it's important to plan. Because if you want an example of when it goes wrong when you don't plan for a referendum or a massive constitutional change, look to Brexit. Cameron told the Foreign Office of the FCO not to plan for Brexit, and the Select Committee said this exacerbated post-referendum uncertainty and made the Brexit task more difficult. This led to the polarisation of the political society in Britain, and if that happened in Northern Ireland, there is a chance that the society that we've created, what is increasingly integrated, might fall apart. And that is one of the identities that people share strongly, and that would be crushing. That would be devastating. And that would be because of idleness or negligence from the Irish government. But if you want a better example of what reunification looked like, we have to look to Germany. Legally speaking, Germany and Northern Ireland are quite similar in their outlook when it comes to reunification. But now I'm going to actually talk about Ireland. The existing constitutional issues are a key debate and precedent stone. There are three basically routes on what would happen to a new constitution. There would have to be a referendum favouring unification, could probably mean a constitutional replacement for a new constitutional convention. Well, if that makes no sense, that would mean that would have to be a constitutional convention to agree a new constitution that agrees Loyalists, Republicans in Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland itself, and all main political parties. That would have to be implemented over a large period of time. I mean, there's no dispute. Some of the constitutional questions are going to be quite large, like over flags and national anthem and languages. That's going to take a lot of time and a lot of deliberation and dialogue. I personally don't believe that the current constitution can be kept if there was to be reunification. I really don't. Because the unitary Dublin model means that all the power would be still in Dublin. So people from loyalist backgrounds may feel politically disenfranchised, and this might lead to less social harmony. This may see the breakdown of the Northern Irish peace process. I believe a new constitution based on federalism between the four provinces is vitally needed to create a new reunited Ireland. And as that suggests, that's going to take a lot of time. And it's a quite controversial idea how this sovereignty of powers is going to be implemented and shared out. A key problem is the economy. The economy of Ireland and Northern Ireland are very much different. Northern Ireland has more of a welfare presence, and the Republic does not. And the problem is also, we're talking about the sovereignty of nations, the power of nations. Well, Ireland doesn't actually have monetary sovereignty. So it's going to take time just to implement the euro in Northern Ireland. That's going to have to be planned. And if you think that a reunited Ireland is even in 30 years' time, for example, I mean, this process could take 5 years, not even to the fact of the matter that if this Great Hall of Stormont closes down, the convergence report that would be needed to adopt the euro in this in Northern Ireland could take longer because the report actually that needs to be submitted to the EU wouldn't be created. So if you planned it now, you would already have a convergence report that would be able to be submitted to the EU, and then adoption of the euro would be quicker. That's very complicated. I haven't explained it in the greatest way, and I apologise for that, but that's the point that I'm trying to get at. A lot of things have been made about cost. As I said, there's more of a welfare presence in Northern Ireland, and the IIEA study says that it will cost about 20 billion for the Republic to take on the welfare provisions in the north. I don't think this is the case. This is assuming that wages in the north would increase to the cost of public sectors in Ireland. So the cost is actually about 2 billion. That's gone a lot quicker than I thought. But if you want to see the complicated issues that reunification poses, think of football. Think of the bilateral, multilateral negotiations in a football. You would have to create a new league that was agreed by the FA and the Irish Association. You would have to go to UEFA just to get their approval. You would have to go to FIFA for a United Ireland team. I mean, that's a very trivial issue that has a lot of heart. And if we relate it back to East Germany, there's a lot of resentment because when they unified their football leagues, East Germany was disadvantaged and all the footballers went to the West German teams. This can be applied to social provisions, welfare and everything. This time has gone incredibly quickly. And I may have done my speech a bit fast and some of my points haven't been coherent. But I just want to say that it would be an ultimate shame that the Irish government, not planning for unification now when there's a good relationship, would disrupt and harm the identities of the peace society that we have created. And I personally think if that's through negligence and idleness, that would be the biggest sentimental tragedy that there has been since Brexit. Thank you and vote for the proposition.
So the first speaker for the opposition is Beth Lynam.
Okay, to start off, I'd like to thank Mullan for giving me her laptop. Without this very physically could not have happened. But the topic of United Ireland has sparked much debate over the years, from the beginning of partition to Churchill's wartime offer to the Good Friday Agreement and the concept of a border poll. Yet, with the UK recently leaving the EU, support for United Ireland has never been higher. An Irish Times survey in 2023 showed that 64% of people supported a United Ireland. We are inching ever closer to what seems to be the inevitable. Now, to be clear, I am not against the concept. I would love to see United Ireland in my lifetime, because the motion today is not about whether we want a United Ireland or not, just whether it is now is the time to prepare, that we should have a border poll soon, and the answer is no. It is not time for the Irish government to prepare for unity. The cost of living crisis is something that every Southerner is very familiar with. The cost of housing, schooling, healthcare and transport is rising as salaries remain stagnant for the most part. And the government does not seem to be interested in solving this. Instead, focusing on increasing the supply of housing in the market, they've lengthened the Help to Buy scheme that just gives people money to buy these unaffordable homes and not solving the core issue. Instead of keeping net spending below 5%, they've spent more than that, which has increased domestic prices and has led to higher inflation. This government has struggled in many key core areas to solve these important issues, which leads to the question, how will they handle a United Ireland, and will this actually benefit the people or just satisfy a strong-held ideology? A United Ireland requires a delicate balancing act and a deep, complex discussion about every core institution on this island.
PY?
Yes?
If you're going to talk about a complex discussion, does that not include an Irish government preparing and planning and being part of that discussion, given the fact that they're going to be a major benefactor with this come about?
Yes, I think that, but as you see further in my speech, you'll see that basically we have so many more complex issues like housing, like the black hole that is the HSC, like all these other issues that we can't really focus at the moment all of our attention on a United Ireland, and that this government is not really capable of, what I personally, slightly biased, do not think this government is perfectly capable of solving these complex issues at the moment, and that they need to focus all their attention on what is currently causing issues within Ireland and not on hypotheticals in the future that could, we're not against United Ireland, but could in the future be done. But at the moment, no, we should not be preparing. It would be irresponsible to ignore how complex a United Ireland would be. Few countries have been partitioned and even fewer have been reunified. The most famous example is Germany, which has been mentioned by the first prof. But you can't really compare these examples. Germany was partitioned and reunified within a lifetime, 40 years to be exact. Most politicians working during reunification remembered a united Germany. With Ireland, the country's been partitioned for over 100 years and has actually never been united independently of the UK. There's no framework for the Irish and British governments to work off of. And now people may argue, just because it's hard doesn't mean we should do it. We shouldn't do it. It's no pain, no thank you. If there's no pain, there's no gain. And that's fair. But what is the gain? Not to go fully westward on this whole thing. It's Bralum air and all. But there will be severe economic consequences. And with the aforementioned cost of living crisis, it is something that the people can absorb comfortably or not? Now, something about me is that I'm from Dublin, northern to be specific, the non-gentrified part of it, despite what the accent implies. And now you may be wondering what I'm doing in Belfast. Other than the fact that my degree isn't offered in Dublin, I didn't want to stay. Dublin is expensive, it's crowded, and the nightlife is small for the size of the population. It's hard to be a young person in Dublin, no thank you, and in the south in general. I'm lucky that I wouldn't have to pay rent, which costs about the same in Dublin for what I pay in Belfast in rent and accommodation. In fees and accommodation. But that's the reality for many young people in Ireland. The youth are fleeing in their thousands to Australia, Canada, anywhere with a lower cost of living, cheaper housing, and a better overall quality of life. If you ask me to rank how important a United Ireland is to me, it would rank pretty low to me and to many other young people, especially behind housing, health, and transportation. And no, Dermot, it's not because I'm a West Brit. Talking about economics, related to United Ireland is difficult because every study is tainted with bias for and against the idea. But I'm going to dare to wade through this issue. A study from Trinity College Dublin estimated that United Ireland would reduce its standard of living by 5 to 10% and increase taxation to fund reunification. This is something that many people in Ireland, North and South, cannot afford. Maybe pre-2008 recession, Ireland was in a better place to reunify and the people were more able to absorb the shock. But the position we are currently in, it is unaffordable and against the best interests of the people. Currently, there needs to be long-term investment into housing, healthcare, and dare I say defence before we can think about reunification. I know that people may think that there will never be a time then, that if we constantly move the goalposts, that we need a perfect economy, perfect society for reunification. We don't. We don't want that, but at least a healthy society where most people can afford necessities and want and be able to stay in the country. There needs to be more focus on the current affairs of the country before we can dare to dream about a United Ireland. Again, I'd love a United Ireland, but we cannot ignore these pressing issues that will be exacerbated by reunification, with people already struggling to solve these issues. Earlier, I mentioned a survey about how support has increased over the years, but this is what I like to call soft nationalism. People like me who want it but don't prioritise it over other social issues. The proposition mentioned creating a new island, but this is one of the most controversial ideas, with this being the most unpopular form of United Ireland, especially in the south, of the idea that there be, no longer governed by Dublin, but from multiple different areas. There's also the issue, which is kind of niche, that this would require a border poll, a referendum, something that historically the South has not been a fan of, having voted mainly against every single referendum ever put forward them in the first round, from the treaties of Lisbon to the most recent Women in the Home referendum. And there's also a sour taste in the South for a referendum I can say I do not like when they come about, because the government, again, cannot run them. And I know there's complete anti-government bias in this, and it is, because I didn't vote for Fianna Fáil in a Gael government. But it is something we have to deal with now, and yeah, so in conclusion, I thank you for listening and I beg you to oppose.
And our second speaker for the proposition is Mullan Haslam.
Okay, good afternoon everyone. I'm here today to ask you to imagine waking up in a country where every voice matters, where artificial borders no longer divide us, where we stand together as one people, forging a shared future. Today, I'm not here to dwell on the past, but to present a vision of unity, of strength, and of an Ireland that no longer defines itself by division, but by its boundless potential. The idea of United Ireland is not a radical fantasy, it's not an impossible dream, it's an idea whose time has come. No longer confined to history books or political rhetoric, the call for unity is growing, driven by the realities of our time. It's a call for progress, for economic opportunity, social harmony, and for a future that belongs to us all. So today, I ask you to consider, why shouldn't we start planning now? Why not us? Why not an Ireland whole and free? For centuries, Ireland has been a land of resilience, a place where culture, identity, and the indomitable spirit of the people have endured against the tides of colonial rule, partition, and conflict. The partition of Ireland in 1921 was not a democratic choice made by the Irish people as a whole. It was an imposition, a bandage placed on a deeper wound. Partition created two separate political entities, but did not erase the shared history, language, and cultural heritage of the Irish people. It drew a line across an island that had, for thousands of years, existed as a single nation. It divided families, stifled economic growth, and forced generations to live under an arrangement that never fully reflected their will. Despite this, Ireland has remained connected. Cross-border initiatives, cultural exchanges, and the undeniable pull of a common identity have kept the spirit of unity alive. The past century has proved that Ireland functions best when it works together, not when it's artificially divided. The path to unity is not about rewriting history, but about acknowledging our shared identity. Some may say unity is an economic risk, but I say look around. The Republic of Ireland has transformed itself into one of Europe's strongest economies, an innovation hub attracting global businesses. With a GDP per capita amongst the highest in the EU, Ireland has become a powerhouse of technology, finance, and pharmaceuticals. Meanwhile, Northern Ireland remains tethered to an economy that struggles with underinvestment and the uncertainties of Brexit. A united Ireland would mean a harmonised economic system, one that maximises the strengths of both regions.
On that point?
No, thank you. No longer would businesses have to navigate two regulatory frameworks, differing tax systems and trade restrictions. The all-island economy, already growing in areas like agriculture and healthcare, could fully flourish. Imagine the benefits: a single market, streamlined infrastructure, and increased foreign direct investment into a stable, unified Ireland.
On that point,
Okay.
some would argue that Northern Ireland, under the protocol, doesn't just have single market access, it has dual market access to the European Union and to mainland Great Britain, and also access with down towards the south. So why would we sacrifice that for an all-Ireland economy?
I would argue that the borders between Ireland and the north of Ireland as well pose a problem with EU restrictions and trading throughout the countries. The border, which currently complicates trade and daily life, would disappear, making it easier for businesses to grow, for students to access education, and for families to move freely without bureaucratic barriers. The question is not whether Ireland can afford unity, it's whether we can afford to remain divided. The demographic shift in Northern Ireland tells a clear story. The old certainties of unionism are fading. A new generation is emerging, one that values inclusivity over division, opportunity over stagnation. A united Ireland is not taking away identities, it's about building a nation that embraces them. The British identity cherished by many in Northern Ireland does not have to be erased. It can coexist within a new, pluralistic Irish state. No, thank you. Just as the Irish identity has endured and thrived globally, so too can British cultural heritage within a united Ireland. This is about belonging, about creating a society where unionists, nationalists, and those who identify as neither can live together under a government that represents them all. At its core, this is a question of justice. A united Ireland is not about nationalism in its narrow sense. It's about democracy, self-determination, and the right of people of this island to decide their own destiny. It's about healing old wounds, not opening new ones. It's about moving forward together rather than remaining trapped in the divisions of the past. But United Ireland is not something to be imposed. It must be chosen. And when that choice comes, it must be met with a fair vision of inclusivity and a prosperous society. Unity is about fairness. It's about ending the legacy of a partition that was never intended to last. It's about ensuring that future generations grow up in a country where their opportunities are not limited by an outdated and unnecessary border. It's about creating an Ireland where all citizens, regardless of background, are given equal opportunity to succeed. So today we stand at crossroads. One path keeps us bound by division, by economic efficiency, by an identity shaped by conflict and separation. The other leads us to an Ireland that is whole, an Ireland that embraces its diversity, harnesses its economic potential, and reclaims its future on its own terms. The question is not whether unity is possible, but whether we have the courage to make it happen. Do we remain tethered by the past, hesitant and fearful, or do we move boldly forward with a vision of a thriving, peaceful, and united Ireland? Let us be the generation that chooses unity. Let us be the voices that refuse to settle for a divided Ireland. Let us step forward together towards a future worthy of our history and our hope. The time is coming, and when it does, let us answer it in one voice, choosing a path towards a united Ireland for all.
Thank you. Our second opposition speaker is Ella O'Neill.
Dí chuig Ushlas mór an Ireland about Anseo and me. So my name is Ella. I'm a student from Trinity where I study English at the minor in Irish. And when I started in first year, there was only 3 of us on this degree. So not a super popular combination, not much overlap you would imagine between English and Irish, which is what a lot of people said when I told them what I studied. They were like, yeah, English and Irish, okay, cool, for sure. What it did give me the opportunity to do was to think a lot about how I perceive my own kind of Irish identity. I'm from Dublin, I've grown up in Dublin my whole life, I've never lived anywhere else. And mostly when I say I'm Irish, people pretty much accept that. And they're like, yeah, all right, you seem Irish. Apart from a few kind of American tourists who, when I give tours of the campus, say that I sound American, but I don't know how true that is. Pretty much people are pretty happy to accept my identity as Irish. And looking back into the kind of the English literary tradition, we have this kind of growing Irish literary tradition in the 20s where we have all these kind of things written in English talking about being Irish. And kind of there is a kind of complexity there where it's like, where do we draw the line between Irish and English literature within that? So I've had a bit of a chance to think about how I perceive myself as being Irish through studying both English and Irish. And I think thinking particularly about how we kind of view Irish and Irish culture and Irish heritage in the Republic, it's often kind of a backwards looking kind of trying to reclaim something that we think we've lost or are losing or that's dying, particularly looking at the language. And I think that we would have a similar kind of approach to a unified Ireland. It would be one that's kind of looking backwards to something that we kind of need to reclaim, even though as we hear from first opposition, this is something that's never really existed, we've never really had a kind of true united Ireland. But I do think the Irish government would propose a united Ireland that wasn't fit for purpose for the kind of wider majority of the people who are going to live within it. But the main thing I'm going to talk about in this speech is that how we define Irish identity. And how people in the South particularly define Irish identity and what they would want to see in a united Ireland. So I think often we kind of define ourselves in opposition to Britishness, right? We say that our culture and our language and our traditions have prevailed despite years of oppression and kind of occupation. So that being Irish is mostly being proud of what we've overcome. I think that's a pretty kind of bit of a sweeping generalisation, but I think mostly people in the South would agree that's what they kind of, when you ask someone what it means to be proud to be Irish, is that they value the kind of sustaining kind of cultural traditions that have lasted this long. So I think when Molly tells us that in a united Ireland we'll be willing to accept these kind of British aspects of identity in the South, I'm not necessarily sure if that's true, because I think of the way that we consider our identity is in opposition to these kind of like British past and the British kind of presence that we've had in Ireland. Often when we say we are proud to be Irish, it's in kind of opposition to that. In a moment. And recent polling kind of supports this. So we've talked a little bit about this already with the analysing research in Ireland, North and South kind of released some polls recently last month. They did the Irish Times did a whole big thing with all the new research. And one of the polls said that there is a reluctance among many Southern voters to make any changes to their state in order to accommodate unionists. And this includes, so they will not change flags, symbols, emblems, and crucially will not make financial sacrifices in order to accommodate a united Ireland. So we're all very accepting of this kind of symbolic, kind of nebulous idea of what we think that unity is in a moment. But when it comes to actually kind of making real practical change, people in the South often aren't willing to do it. They're willing to kind of accept this idea of kind of absorbing the 6 counties into the existing kind of South, but we're not willing to make kind of a big change to create a new state.
POA, do you not think that because there isn't much consensus that the Irish government should be one of the voices leading this cause and obviously pushing initiatives to actually educate and help people understand what this would look like?
Sure. I think, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a moment, but I think that right now we see polls, as Noah tells us, we see that there's a shift towards support for unity or kind of acceptance of unity. Even if we don't support unity outright, there's a shift towards accepting unity if it were to happen. But I think at the moment that's all based on our own kind of individual conceptions of what we view unity to be. So each individual person sees unity as something different, and so they're able to kind of accept whatever version of unity they think will persist into the present. When we start to prepare for unity, we see where these divisions lie, and we see where the kind of fractures exist. And so amongst a group of people in the South who are relatively kind of cohesive in what they view, how they kind of conceptualize their identity, we kind of create divisions within that group of people by preparing for unity and explaining what unity might look like. So I think we have a relatively kind of cohesive and homogeneous group of people in terms of how they view their identity. When we come to preparing for unity and we make changes to the state, make changes to the flag and the emblems and the symbols and the national anthem, that then you have more division amongst people in the South. You start to kind of reveal the kind of changes, reveal the differences in how people conceive of their identity. And I think that's probably bad for having a productive and long-lasting united Ireland. Having more divisions in a place where previously there maybe wasn't very many is not necessarily a good thing. But I think the idea of planning for something generally seems pretty reasonable. Like, even if it's not something you want to happen, planning for it is probably pretty good. It's good to have plans. Prepared to prepare. That saying is that people like to say that. I think we hear kind of a good response to that from Beth, where it's like it will be, as we heard from Noah, a really, really long process. Ranging anywhere from like 5 to 30 years. So it's going to take a really long time to kind of put this in place. And in the meantime, we have communities in north and south of the border that need kind of real, tangible and present change, like solving the homelessness crisis, like solving housing issues, like solving kind of mental health support across the whole island. And that necessarily you sacrifice some of those things when you come to preparing for United Ireland. It's expensive. You have to, referendums apparently are really expensive to run. I found that out last year during the Irish Times final. Referendums are crazy expensive for some reason. I don't know why. So even the act of hosting a referendum is pretty expensive. And you have to kind of convene working groups like the one Dr. Gillespie is a part of, and you have to, have all these big preparations that are very, very expensive to do. And as Beth tells us, unity just never will be a priority for most people living in the south. They like it kind of nebulously as an idea, and it's like, hey, if I could wake tomorrow in United Ireland and everything was the same except I had 6 more counties, yeah, sure, why not? But when it comes to preparing for it and putting in this effort and putting this time and talking about changing our identities and changing how we conceive of who we are and kind of maybe encompassing a kind of Britishness within our identity, people in the south just aren't willing to do that, as polling kind of backs up and suggests. So when it comes to a United Ireland that will mean sacrifice to people in the south and will mean kind of economic sacrifices, like symbolic and emblematic sacrifices, people just aren't willing to do that. And therefore any United Ireland that is kind of driven and led by the government in the south will not be one that is suitable for everyone and will not be one that lasts. So essentially that we should not prepare for United Ireland because there are more pressing issues that we have. And that unity will never be the most pressing issue for southern voters. I'm incredibly proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you. The third speaker for the proposition is James Tourish.
Well, Gurth Mahogat, I feel that today I must begin this speech by first acknowledging the ground that we all stand on here today. Many great people have indeed passed through the doors of this monumental building. Visionaries, leaders, those with experience of the dreadful past, but have since sought to work for a better future. Indeed, it has taken a tremendous effort for this place to work, and even at that, it not always does. And so, my friends, I must use the words of a great political visionary in his own right, Benjamin Franklin. And indeed, the quote has already been said today, but I'll repeat it. If you fail to prepare, then you shall prepare to fail. Ladies and gentlemen, the fact is this. We are not here today to say that if a border poll were held, it would pass. We are not here today to pontificate to anyone that Irish unity is a political inevitability or that the union is on its knees. But I can stand here before all of you and say with confidence that the pendulum of politics in this province is moving towards reunification. And what is most needed at this time is effective preparation from the Irish government on this matter if the prospect of unity is to succeed, and that the practical implementation of this can be achieved. Now let us look at the wording of this motion. Why is it time now for the Irish government to prepare for unity? Well, I believe it is because we need to plan for the future, not focus on the past. The political aspiration for a united Ireland is the highest it has ever been within the 6 counties. The latest Lucid Talk poll says that at least 41% of voters are in support of a united Ireland. And if this trend is to continue, then a majority shall come about in 2035.
Question.
Yes, I accept.
So it's been at the lowest it's ever been in the other 26 since the inception of the Irish Free State. So,
well, the fact is there's a majority. There's 65% in the Republic. A referendum would quite easily pass. So the point is largely irrelevant, I have to say. There is indeed not a solid majority in Northern Ireland today. But we are not here to debate today What is preparation? Preparation is about the future. So let's look at the future. We're much better than reading headlines. Of course, 48% say they would want to remain in the Union, but let us look at the future as I talk about. Because what the same poll says from Lucid Talk is that 50% of under 35s support a United Ireland, with 44% seeking to remain in the Union. But I must say, in even more emphatic terms, 60% of under 35s support unity within 20 years. Is this not a cause that deserves preparation? Is this not something that is deserving of an Irish government committed to planning, to preparing, to putting forward cost-effective proposals? I think so. But listen, we can spend all the time in the world debating about the here and the now, but the real fundamental question is about what the future holds. And in my belief, despite the efforts of Craig and those who sought to ensure that reunification would never happen, we are moving towards a new frontier, one without a border, and hopefully without the baggage of the past. Indeed, this brings me on to my second point. Preparation is absolutely essential if we are to bring about a legitimate and constructive settlement on the future of this island. The planning and preparation must begin now. This is the issue of our time, and the current Irish government must grasp the opportunity that lies before it. Because I say, what would happen if there was not adequate preparation for such an event? Do I need to remind anyone of the House the history of this province? I don't think so. But let I say this. Let it. Yes, I'll accept.
Why is this the most important issue facing both Ireland today?
Because it's about the reunification of our homeland. Because the fact that there are so many that have died for it, that it was created in a way that was artificial, this country. And I believe that, I respect the economic argument. I respect the social argument. I've heard housing and other things brought up today. So let's talk about economics. Let's talk about the 10 billion surplus that the Irish government currently sits on. Let's talk about the fact that the NI executive is currently failing people, that largely there was a negative response to the programme for government. I don't see the same in the South. I see an economy that is the third highest in terms of its GDP. And my friends, we can talk about reunification.
On that point?
And which, no, I'll not accept. But let's talk about the alternative if we are not to reunify. We talk about the economics, but the economics in Northern Ireland, I have to say, isn't much better. People want clarity, so we owe them that, whether they are green, orange or neither. A plan that is detailed and costed, and we need a plan that is detailed and costed, and the Irish government's role in this endeavour is absolutely essential. Now, I have heard from Beth. She said that this question is indeed very complex, but I would only pose this question to the House. If it is so complex, then why don't we invite the Irish government to have a say in it, a major benefactor? We also talk about planning for referendums. I have a curse word here. Brexit, if anything. I don't really have to say much because you all know where I'm going with this. What happens when you don't prepare much for a referendum and people vote in a way that's perhaps not educated? Well, you get Brexit. But my friends, I'll leave you all with this. A pessimist on a boat complains about the wind. The optimist expects the weather to change, but my friends, the realist, well, he just adjusts the sails. The current Irish government must take the lead to act boldly, to put the reunification of our country to the forefront of the agenda, and they must take a proactive approach, because any less would be an injustice against those who have given so much in such a pressing issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our third opposition speaker is Jonathan Massey.
On the 24th of February this year, the United Nations General Assembly convened in the 11th emergency meeting. The 11th emergency meeting has been running on and off for around 3 years. The 11th emergency meeting of the United Nations General Assembly concerns the war in Ukraine. On the 24th of February, it was the 3-year anniversary. Resolutions were brought to the General Assembly. Resolutions condemning, in the strictest terms, Russia's aggression. Resolutions calling for restraint. Resolutions submitted by Ukraine, the party who has been attacked. And I'm happy to say the resolution passed. ES 11-7 successfully passed the General Assembly. Only 18 countries voted against. Amongst these 18, such bastions of democracy, such bastions of freedom as Sudan, Eritrea, North Korea, Belarus, Burundi, Russia, and of course, our old friends the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, we're living in a complex geopolitical time. A lot of people thought that the second Trump presidency would be toothless. We've seen how wrong that has been. In the first 2 months alone, things have changed dramatically internationally. Is this the time for Ireland to look inwards? To look at a complicated process that restructures the very state? Is this a time for Ireland to turn its back on the world and focus on its domestic issues? Or is this a time for Ireland to stand strong, to stand where it has always stood, and to support principles of freedom and principles of democracy?
Okay, Mike.
Go ahead.
Don't you think that in this uncertain world of populism and states broken down, particularly in England, reunification is more likely and it's more likely to prepare?
I find like the point that you were making earlier in your speech slightly confusing. The idea that England would break off from the rest of the UK, I don't think is something that's politically discussed within the UK circles at all. And I just don't see any sort of way that happens. I don't think there's a big movement in the UK to split Northern Ireland off. Like we saw within England, Scottish independence was very strongly objected against, and Reform have never sort of spoken about how they want to get rid of Northern Ireland. So I think this is sort of a hypothetical that's being invented by side proposition. But let's focus on tariffs, because tariffs have been threatened against a great many states. We've had tariffs threatened against the UK, Germany, France, Portugal, the Netherlands, Canada. And here's the thing. Which country relies on a healthy trade relationship with America like no other? Which country relies on the flows of foreign direct investment? Which country might Trump want to target for allowing US companies to evade tax? Ireland. Ireland is threatened. Ireland is faced with a great sort of existential threat from outside. This is the wrong time for Ireland to look inwards. Unification, as has been said by side opposition, and side proposition requires a great deal of deliberation, a great deal of reconstruction. New government structures will have to be created. Will Ireland become a devolved state? The constitution will almost certainly need to be changed. The legal systems, the welfare systems, security systems will all have to be reconsidered. Northern Irish institutions, their place in a united Ireland will have to be considered. What happens to Stormont? What happens to the PSNI? What happens to the Northern Irish judicial system? Will the Republic finally get Greggs? The flag may need changing. The anthem may need changing. So, what focus do we sacrifice in order to prepare for unification? Because, as I argue, we cannot sacrifice the focus on the outside world.
Point of information?
No, thank you. Ireland has a tendency, in times of international crisis, to look inwards. When we look at World War II, Ireland declared the emergency. Ireland turned inwards and did not speak to the rest of the world. Was this the correct thing for Ireland to do? Do we all in this room feel that Ireland acted appropriately? Should Ireland do the same now?
POA?
No, thank you. Ireland needs to reconsider its economy. Does it want to stay as a country dependent on foreign direct investment? Or in this changing global dynamic where great power politics is re-emerging, does Ireland need to consider trying to break away from relying on the US, on increasingly unstable global partners? Does Ireland need to reconsider its military, the size, the scope of its military? To pursue unification, to prepare for unification at such a time, would destabilise Ireland's functioning political system. I know Brexit has been brought up a lot by side proposition, but we saw the impact of Brexit on the UK's politics. We saw how we got through more prime ministers than sort of Italy in the late 20th century. We saw how it created an incredibly unstable state. This is the wrong time for Ireland to consider entering into such a thing. Ireland must look outwards in this changing global dynamic. Ireland must focus its efforts on collaboration with the EU, on collaboration with other international partners. Ireland must not undertake a constitutional and political shift, the like of which has never been seen within the Irish state in history.
Here, right?
Go ahead.
Kind of do two things at once. Kind of look at the outward shift and global collaborations, but also focus on reunification.
How? Where does the extra capacity to do these two things at once come from? If this is the case, why isn't Ireland preparing for unification right now? Surely we have to sacrifice one thing to get another. That's just the way the world works. We can't focus on everything all of the time to the fullest extent. No. Ireland must be looking outwards. Ireland must be turning the ship into the waves and trying to ride out the storm. Ireland cannot curl up into a chrysalis of its own making, pursuing unification at the expense of the world. Look at Guatemala. Guatemala is about to lose $60 million in US aid funding. That's going to cause vital humanitarian disasters. It's going to cause insane levels of reduction in the risk-averse nature of US funding. Global weather climate event, that could seriously damage the people of Guatemala. Ireland needs to stand with its international partners now more than ever as an unchanging force on the global stage. To begin to pursue unification would shift Ireland away. It would make Ireland more unpredictable, more unsustainable as an ally, and ultimately would damage the global framework and would lead to greater instability in the world.
Thank you. The next speaker, the final speaker for the proposition is Ritvik Kumar.
Pal, can you hear me? Okay, so I think there are a few points that we get from opposition. I think the first one is we need to sort of clarify what this motion is first about. It's not about saying this will happen, it's about saying if this happens, this is what it's going to look like. In the sense that this is not going to be something that, this is not going to be a final plan, this is going to be the Republic describing if a United Ireland were to happen, how it would look like. We know this has to be the case because we've already signed the Good Friday Agreement, which says that there needs to be a very clear national consensus on whatever happens. And I think beyond that, even if it is, like Ella said, it's not the most important point. That doesn't stop us from discussing it. In my speech, I will go over why it's the most important point. But even if it isn't, we're able to juggle these things right now. There are still politicians in both government and opposition discussing a united Ireland. We're just saying we should do it to a bit larger extent. That being said, I think this year is particularly special, especially for a unification debate. That's because it's been 5 years now since the UK left the EU. For context, there are immigrants who would have landed here on the day that it happened, and they'd be able to apply for citizenship. And that's true on both sides of the border. That means there are still British and Irish adults that have only seen a Northern Ireland plagued with uncertainty, who for much of their time in this country would not have seen Stormont working. Clearly, we still don't have a concrete long-term plan for what happens to Northern Ireland, and that needs to change. In my speech, I'm going to talk about the uncertain atmosphere over here, why discussing specifics right now is how we move away from this, and why it's the only way a fair referendum can be held in order to show why this island is ready for unity. First, the scenario with Brexit has not made things better in Northern Ireland. We knew from the start that a hard border in the island was not feasible. What we also found out the hard way was that an Irish sea border also had issues, with the 6 counties and the way they interact with the EU not being the same as the rest of the UK. This angered unionists, while nationalists still don't get what they want. The thing is, any solution that involves these 6 counties being separate from the 26 is going to be seen as temporary by nationalists, and unionists tend to not want Northern Ireland's status in the Union Compromise. The current form of Northern Ireland, unfortunately, doesn't make the communities happy. And that's not changing right now, because for however long the UK and Ireland are in different trade blocs, Northern Ireland will always get caught in the crossfire. The people of Northern Ireland deserve to be offered a solution to this. While loyalists are probably going to be unhappy either way with the UK falling victim to the Brussels effect, we can give nationalists what they want. A border poll within our lifetimes is definitely possible, but the question is, will it pass? And admittedly, at the moment, it's probably unlikely. We're given a few stray promises by both governments regarding a potential unification. We know it's supposed to be peaceful, and we know that Northern Ireland's EU membership will be restored. But we still don't have nearly enough information to make any sensible decision. How will the North move its currency over? What happens to the NHS? I don't see Northern Irish people giving that up. Now, I could see this ambiguity turning people, even nationalists, away from voting for a united Ireland in a border poll, and that's understandable because the Republic has failed them, instead coming up with this very vague ideal to back it up. Not only that, but having no reunification plan just shows communities in Northern Ireland that they aren't being listened to. Realistically, people here don't have a say in how reunification will look, and when they can't see and comment on plans for it. The Republic says that unification can happen, but it won't explain how it will come about, even after the referendum. Potentially worse, though, is that this ambiguity already is a breeding ground for fear-mongering and misinformation, particularly among the most vulnerable on this island and across communities. We all know what misinformation has the potential to do to our island. Under the shadow of not only Brexit, but also foreign interference, the same one that you already mentioned. The only way that we think it's particularly important to deal with this issue right now, before bad actors, particularly one that I don't want to name, could come in and use this to peddle their own agendas and destabilize this country further.
On that point?
Yeah.
So why do you think that preparing for unity would not send a message to these bad actors that you're describing that now is the time for them to start trying to destabilise Ireland further?
Okay, often when we prepare for unity, we often do it by being very clear. The way that these people destabilize is by spreading misinformation. But when we have clearly accessible information, that would often make it very clear. That would often counteract any sort of interference that they would do, because now people know that whatever they say is quite frankly bullshit. That's why we need to change the discussion from one of identity, hatred, and fear to one of practicality. This is only possible with the same clear, easily accessible information that I mentioned before. For those that live here, it's entirely understandable why people would vote against joining the Republic. It's a country that sold itself to big tech, has long healthcare waitlists, and a housing crisis tearing stability apart. No matter how nationalist I may, at the end of the day, I want to have a roof over my head and access to healthcare. We don't have a concrete plan in the Republic for giving these people what they need, and the unity will be impossible with a government that can't prove that it'll take care of the North. Here's the thing though, if we do tell people how we unify it, how long it'll take, how much it actually costs, how we pay for it, and what is affected, we will be able... It's reasonable to say that a large section of the people that are currently undecided on unity will decide to vote for it, potentially paving the way for a majority yes vote.
Hey, what?
No thanks. At the moment... Yeah, it's not just like Northern Ireland either. The Republic is taking in a lot of British citizens, people who will probably choose to stay British, meaning there needs to be a change in the way that British citizens are allowed to vote. However, I highly doubt that this is going to be a massive cultural shift. Already, British people and Irish people have more in common than they have that differs. Most British and Irish people speak English as a first language, probably eat like beans for breakfast or something. It's not that big a difference, realistically. Everyone in this room understands me, British and Irish. People won't necessarily... Oh, and yeah, okay, fair enough. People won't necessarily react to unification positively. And now is probably not the right time for a referendum. But remember, passing this motion isn't really deciding on unity. Passing this motion means making plans for it. It means not having another referendum like Brexit where people were uninformed and there was foreign interference in our elections. It means demanding that our government, before the referendum, tell us the conditions under which it will happen, which is not really happening to a great extent right now. Unification is inherently going to be an uncomfortable discussion to have, and one that brings up many scars. However, at a time when Europe needs to stick together the most, it's a discussion that needs to be had more than ever before it's taken advantage of. This is how we tell when we're ready for unification, when there's a concrete plan that both sides of this border agree on, so we can be done with it and put it behind us. Beg you to propose.
Thank you. And our final speaker for the opposition is Eoin Connolly.
Honourable Chair, members of the Literific and the Hist, fellow speakers. As already has been noted, the poetry shouldn't be lost on us this afternoon while we're debating the notion of the Irish government considering Irish unity in a place that was so often populated and spoken by many very talented people who were opposing both that government and that prospect. But this is always about looking forward. As we've seen tonight, I think there are two main dimensions to this discussion. Firstly, why now? Why is this the time, or why isn't it? What are the developments, the challenges, and the opportunities we see with regard to this question? And secondly, what should or shouldn't change? What are the new actions that preparing for unity would entail? To state clearly, a united Ireland is something I aspire to. I want it understood more by more people. I want us prepared for it when the time comes, and for all the reasons that have been outlined. But is this the time? My fellow speakers on this side have discussed the shortcomings of the Irish government on key domestic issues and the wider geopolitical situation we find ourselves in. I'd like to touch a bit on these and a few other points in general. Let's begin with the timing, because where do we stand today on the prospect of a united Ireland? The surveys have been quoted constantly. This is the Aaron's Project. And there's obviously been a growing trend for support ever since Brexit. We've had that growing interest in this possibility. You've seen an increased support, but still there is a majority for remaining in the United Kingdom. But you've also seen a growing willingness amongst the Unionists polled to accept the outcome should it be pro-United Ireland. So I do think there's progress on this. But unity may not be the imminent inevitability we might think. Because again, that vote, even the Aaron's Project one, still has remaining in the UK leading by 14%. And most of the increase that you've seen in the yes vote over the years has actually just been amongst the Catholic community, which made up the largest portion of that kind of 7% increase in the past few years. No, thank you. I do think there is an upper limit to this. I don't think that this won't eventually become a majority. I think it will. I do think that is inevitable. But I do not think it is as soon as we may think. Additionally, the chaos of Brexit has generally subsided. There is not so much public attention on the constant, needing to renegotiate and the various issues encountered. So I don't think there is as much scrutiny on the place in the UK as a result of that as there once was. Yeah. So I think that growth slows down. No, thank you. So I don't think the time to prepare is now. In 5 to 10 years, it could well be, but I do not think it is now. So briefly responding to a couple things that have come up. I do agree that the Brexit referendum is an excellent lesson in why you should prepare ahead of referendums. I think not just the people in this room have learnt that, and I do think that if a referendum were to be called, I don't think we would just call it on a whim and not do any preparation, because again, this has to be called by the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, and we'll obviously consult the governments here on it. So even if we have reached the point and we haven't actually done any preparation yet where we think that the referendum should be called, I do think we'll have learnt to have a bit of a period to figure it out first, even though I would still want to prepare a few years in advance, but I don't think we're having the sudden prospect of accidentally we stumble into a unity referendum and we've never discussed it in the first place. I don't think the people making the decision to call it are going to do that because they have very much learnt from their mistakes on this issue. No, thank you. And as was pointed out by the last speaker, they've kind of made this point, which I do sympathise with, which is how can people in Northern Ireland trust the prospect of joining this new United Ireland government when they feel that the government in the Republic shows that it cannot look after them? I agree. I also don't think they can trust the prospect of joining a United Ireland with a government that fails to look after its own people in the South. So, what does it mean to prepare for this? Because by the end of Prop, I'm still a bit unclear on what that entails other than having meetings. As things stand, there is dialogue. Various forums and research projects operate with funding from the Irish government, by the way. While there is certainly room for them to grow, and I'd like to see them grow, simply expanding these discussions can't begin to constitute the Irish government preparing for unity. Unity would entail, as many people have discussed, entire bureaucratic and institutional restructuring, the likes of which we haven't seen since Ireland entered the EEC, perhaps even since the creation of the Irish Free State.
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
If it involves such a major restructuring of the bureaucracy, then why would it not be?
Yes, I agree with you. We should prepare for it at that point. I just don't think it's now because of the monumentalness of this task. I don't think it being difficult is a sufficient thing with why we should never do it, but just getting to the other things. You need to redesign and redefine civil service and politics. Every public program and service would need to be rebudgeted. The task is going to be monumental. And I'd agree, this is not a reason to say that we shouldn't do it. But But it's about whether considering now is the time. Because for unity to be a viable option for people both north and south to consider, we need to have some confidence that our own house is in order in the first place, because until we can demonstrate that we can provide people's livelihoods as things are, we can't claim to be capable of doing it while redesigning the entire structure of this island. That is a harder task to achieve. As of late, our government has demonstrated an inability to meet their own housing targets that they set, allowed the health service to continually deteriorate, and the list goes on. We cannot prepare for a united Ireland when we are demonstrating being woefully unprepared to meet our own challenges here. Prepping for this properly would expend much needed resources, be they financial, human, or temporal. Again, this is not to say that that will never be worth it. I do believe it will, but in the context of what the challenges we are facing right now, where they are affecting people's daily livelihoods, where people are dying on trolleys and children are going beyond repair on their surgeries because they cannot get past the waiting list in the health service, where people cannot live, where the recently elected president of TCD Students' Union has had to commute from Wexford for 2.5 years because you can't find anywhere to live when you need to go to Trinity, and various myriads of other issues that could really occupy the entire length of another debate. I do think that those things take a lot of work to do, that I think working on preparing for United Ireland would expend time from. I think if we spend time on those issues, I do believe we will have more time to work on this, and I do want that to happen. So I don't believe now is the time for the Irish government to prepare, while faced with these challenges. This isn't to say that no prep of any type shouldn't happen though in that time, because dialogue can and should grow. Discussions like this amongst the generation that will be overseeing the next steps on this journey, these things matter. Every one of your voices matters. Whatever form it may take, it is an honor, pleasure, and privilege to share this island with all of you, and I would like to see us talk about them more, and I would like to see us collaborate more in these kinds of ways so that we can be prepared. Every single one of us has a responsibility to work on that. I think we should all play our part in that. And when the government can finally get their act together on a few things, and I would encourage you to push them to do so, we can prepare better for United Ireland. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank the speakers most enthusiastically. We've had a very interesting debate, a range of issues introduced, the complexities and the balance between the issue of timing and the issue of urgency and priorities. We've also had interestingly integrated debates with both sides, with both the Literific and the Hist represented on both sides of the argument. And that's a plus, really. The time now has come to decide who has the balance of the argument. So, for all those in favour of aye, please say now.
And we would normally raise hands.
Raise hands.
In favour? In favour.
In favour, raise your hands, please.
Henry, is that hand up or down?
No, I think we're in general.
The proposition. Are we allowed to vote?
I can't vote any. Don't worry about it.
21. And those against? Nine. And those abstaining?
I thought this was on speaker ability. Apologies.
Can we have a vote, please, Mr. Secretary?
You can indeed. There are 21 votes for the proposition, 9 votes for the opposition, and 6 abstentions. That's the proposition.
That's pretty clear cut, and I think we're fortunate we have a greater clarity at the end of this debate. I was very struck, going back to the actual text of the proposition. This House believes that it is time for the Irish government to prepare for unity. I think as we went through the debate, the focus on the precise issue of timing came much more into play, and that's a real strength. And it's a strength, obviously, in the debating sense that you're focusing on looking precisely at the proposition that you're asked to debate, but also it raises the question of what's going on in our society and beyond it to drive change in such a way that you would say it is time, in fact, to prepare. And the second element, and it was brought out well by the final speaker, the issue of preparation is key, it seems to me, in this argument. What it means, and various speakers illuminated that. Is it the same as dialogue? Is it the same as deliberation? Or does it entail a decision of the kind that Leo Varadkar referred to, very interestingly I thought, when he said that he wants to make the issue of unity, he wants to translate it from an aspiration to an objective. And that's putting it, I think, clearly. And perhaps that's what the strong argument in favour of preparation would entail, that this is an objective and therefore we ought to prepare for it. That issue is debatable, I think. I have been a journalist for many years in the Irish Times, mainly dealing with international affairs, and lately I've been working in UCD in the School of Politics and International Relations on a whole range of issues, including European integration, but in the last number of years on a project entitled Constitutional Futures After Brexit. And we've had 3 or 4 years of this with a number of fellows. One of the products is a book that I'd like to wave in front of you, which is entitled Political Change Across Britain and Ireland, Identities, Institutions and Futures. And we have 21 academic authors writing 11 chapters. Each chapter is paired between a British and Irish author, and we're raising selected issues about the issues at play, including in the issues of play in Irish unification. But what's interesting, and I thought perhaps wasn't strongly enough brought out in the debate, is what the driving forces include the wider political setting of Britain and Ireland, including the wider setting of the Union, and what's happening in that UK Union. Obviously Brexit disrupts it. But in other respects, and this is one of the arguments coming through this book that I've been involved with, it's a very ropey and uncertain union at present. It has a number of contradictions running through it. It's highly centralised, and yet it has devolved. And that dilemma between those two forces is certainly not resolved, and it's made much more difficult by the economic and political difficulties facing the new Labour government, including the issue of economic growth, which raises the question of how functional this state is, how much it can deliver the aspirations that people have, not only in the centre, not only in the richer southeast of England, but also in the wider union, including the so-called peripheral parts and those that have been devolved. And interestingly, the experiments that we're following amongst the mayors, for example, in Manchester and Liverpool, they were in Dublin recently, explaining very enthusiastically to a very interested audience about how they were getting on with this. So the reason I say this is it's not the mechanical argument that Scotland, might lob off as well, although there is a dialectical exchange, politically, between the two islands and the politics of the two islands. That's why we use the word across, the transversal politics, if you like, in these islands. I thought that wasn't brought out strongly enough, and I would argue myself that that's one of the principal driving forces. Whether that's mitigated by the very interesting developments, positive developments in relations between the governments in Dublin and London is a question worth answering. It didn't really come up. Whether it's mitigated and ought to be taken fully into account in terms of the reconciliation. The argument against preparation now is normally that you need to reconcile first. And of course that can be simply a matter of postponing the issue indefinitely, notwithstanding the aspiration that the people against the motion have referred to. And so these are the issues at play. They're at play obviously for your generation. I've been watching it for many decades, and so have older people here. But your generation is going to have to face this question and its uncertainties. And I've been involved in doing this research. There's far more research being done, and that's a really valuable thing to do because it's mapping out so many of the unknowns, including the elementary stuff about how people in the north and south know one another, and there's an elementary fact there that the further away you are from the border, the less you know, or may have travelled to the north if you're living in the Republic, so that Cork and Kerry people have, etc., etc. We also know that in Northern Ireland and in the Republic, there's an east-west divide almost as important as and it's a regional one, as the north-south one. I'd refer you to a very interesting special issue just published of the journal Studies, which is a special issue on this whole area, and an essay a paper by a very good friend of mine, fellow researcher John Coakley of UCD, and he refers to some of the major issue areas that the debate raises. And the first one is the institutional. And many speakers did refer to the complexity of change that we might have to encounter. A complete restructuring of the states, of the state regimes, of the civil service, of the health, welfare, security arrangements, and so on. Indeed, the Irish state has proved to be rather bad, I would say, in planning. Not only the plan, it got through the last big financial crisis and landed then in a setting of the last 10 or 12 years with the population gone up by 1/5, mainly from in-migration, but they haven't prepared adequately in the infrastructural or the demographic side of that. But looking ahead, if you say you learn those lessons and you don't factor in the thought that you may in fact also be driven to face unification, and you fail to include that in your forward planning, you're a fool. And and I think that Benjamin Franklin quote is a very apt one in those circumstances. They're poor at this, and I would argue personally that the argument for preparation should include not only the dialogues, not only the research, not only the deliberation that's required, but actually to factor in the possibility that this will happen, that unification might happen in the medium to longer term that you need to do to plan the development of your society in any case. And not to do that would be foolish. It would also be imprudent. And there is this prudential argument for unification preparation, it seems to me, that could have come out more strongly in the debate. The final point I'd make is that it's a preparation for referendums rather than simply for the fact that it might happen. If you're a strong unionist, you will recognise the weakness of the unionist case all around the United Kingdom, it seems to me. It's very fragmented. It doesn't really add up. It needs to get its act together if it's going to hold that state together. In the same way that those in favour of an Irish unification need to prepare for that referendum if they want to win it. If you want to translate that aspiration into an objective, you better prepare to make a strong case in favour of unification. So it seems to me that there's a new politics there that's to do with coalition formation, to do with the party systems, as well as the institutional stuff. You have an east-westerly that I've referred to, politics across our islands, and finally, and not to be underestimated, you have the international shocks we're living through, each of which contribute to this argument. So, congratulations, this was a very fruitful exercise in a very historic place, and I think you've done it proud. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Dr. Gillespie. I also forgot to at the start, want to thank the Hist for doing something no boyfriend has ever done for me, and it's bought me flowers. They almost made me cry. But we're all going to head down to Lavery's now. I'm not sure if the Hist bus is coming up here, or you can get the glider if you're heading down from the bottom of the hill. And I will tell the Hist that Lavery's does four quid pints if you have a student card, which is a great advantage. I'd also like to thank our 5 MLAs for coming along to watch. You're also all welcome to come to the pub. You can use my student card if you want. So thank you very much. Thank you to the whole team from the Hist, and that's all from us. Thank you.
Nice one.